Thanks for tuning in. You're watching, listening to the CFF Sites Week 2 show slash podcast with the voice of the CFF site. My name's Joe DeSalvo, and that's right, you heard me right. Week 2 show here. And before you start wondering, hey, did I miss something in week 1? Where's that week 1 show at? Did I miss it? No, you did not. It feels good to be back here in the home office. Week 1 podcast. We did not have one. I was relocated. I had to evacuate for Hurricane Ida. I'm here just north of New Orleans. And so myself, my family, and other family members packed it up. We went east about 4 or 5 hours east, and we stayed together. We were in a room all in one place, 11 of us. And, for those of you that have not experienced this type of event before, it's not the first time I've evacuated. We've had to leave, obviously, for Hurricane Katrina several years back. And, it's quite an experience when you are evacuated and you're watching the Weather Channel and you've got this big hurricane bearing down on your house, and really you're helpless, and all you can really do is sit in a room, hotel, wherever you're staying, hours away from home, and keep your fingers crossed that when the hurricane gets to you, you're going to survive the damage, you're going to survive the wind, you're going to survive the flooding, everything that could possibly, that's related to a natural disaster that comes with a hurricane. You're worried about it all: trees falling through houses, things blowing through windows. And so the best thing is to just pack it up with your family, leave. That's what we did. I packed up all of my things as much as I could, all of my equipment, and basically worked from a condo room with a bunch of family members while they were enjoying some time away as best they could. I was sitting there plugging in with the site, trying to stay in touch with Mike. Him and I were trying to do some things together, make sure that we had everything up on time as close to possible. And I made it back yesterday. I'm recording this. It's Thursday early evening here, just in Covington, Louisiana, just north of New Orleans, and I'm back home. Came home yesterday, and was very blessed that very minimal damage to the house and surrounding house, but a lot of the areas still coming back. A lot of areas around the greater New Orleans area still without power. Many were ravaged by floods. Many were, a lot of places were hit. Power lines, still no power yet, still no working water, houses with trees through them. So it's a widespread event. And I was very fortunate that myself, my family, and I, and a lot of my neighbors were spared. I'm here in my home office, and it feels good to be back. And I called Mike and I said, man, I'm firing up a podcast. I'm firing up a show. I said, it feels good to be home. I feel fortunate, not a lot damage here. And so I just wanted to give you guys some more content. I know the projections, the rankings have been a little behind. I wanted to get them out a little bit sooner over the last couple of weeks, but as you can imagine, there has just been a lot going on. And in addition to the site, you've got your family to think about, and you've got everything else going on. And it feels like I'll be back in the saddle. Normality has restored this weekend. I think I'll get a nice normal weekend of watching more football than I know what than I know what to do with, which is welcome. I didn't get to see much of week 0 because I was obviously on the road that entire day. I relocated 4 hours away. It took me 8 hours because of the traffic that was on the interstate, and those are the type of things that happen when you're facing these type of natural disasters, natural events. And so we're good. The community's coming back, and I think New Orleans is going to be back a lot faster than we originally anticipated, which is a good sign. But I'm ready to go. I'm ready to fire it up. I've got the microphone on, a number of topics to talk about, and so that's what we're going to get into. First of all, let me just say this. Let me address sort of the elephant in the room. I don't want to ignore this. I know many of you all in Discord have reached out. I've tried to reach out to many of you guys via email as well. There is a little bit of an issue right now going on with sort of the site. And I think one of the plugins that we have in regards to membership, and there's a login issue that I know a lot of you guys have been faced with over the last couple of weeks. I don't know what the issues yet. We're still trying to take care of that now. I've got some time to dig into that. Any of you techies out there that are listening to the show, feel free to reach out to me, and maybe we can troubleshoot this thing and get everybody back on track. There's an issue with logging in. It seems like a continuous loop of logging in. And the simple fix seems to be to visit the homepage of the CFF site, click the log out button near the top right of the screen, and then log back in. And it seems to be remedying the problem. So I think it's a quick fix. I want to see what a lot of it is on the back end that's causing it, but we're going to get that taken care of for you guys as soon as possible. We're going to talk about a little bit well, I'm not going to spend my time talking about each and every game. I feel like there's so much going on week 1, week 2. There's so many matchups between FBS and FCS that it just creates an ungodly amount of matchups. And it's impossible to talk about every single one of them. I'll try to touch on some of the major topics as well. And then, before I go any farther as well, I want to mention the 4-in-1 Super Fantasy League kicked off. And I want to be able to kind of give some shout outs this week. I'd like to do that every week. Obviously it's a long season. The first round of the head-to-head tournament kicked off. We've got the first round out of the way. And so we've got a bunch of guys moving on into the second round, had some close calls because there were a lot of all the matchups were 14 matchups with all the teams we had in the tournament. So good luck to everyone going through that has gone through and will go through into the second round. The top 5 scorers in the total points format so far after 1 week: Wizzy Will with 472, AP Sooner 447, PTM 19 with 443, WSM Oak 1 sitting in 4th right now at 439, and Andrew P. Katz Daddy Katz sitting there at 5th at 437.7, but unfortunately he did not advance in the tournament as he lost to WSM Oak, one of the matchups that featured 2 of the top 5 scoring teams. And so Andrew Katz fell to bad luck in the tournament format. But guys, look, if you got eliminated in that format, don't worry about it. You've got another 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks to get your scores up. Remember, the top 80 teams, I think, after the 3rd week are going to qualify for the head-to-head single elimination tournament. You're also trying to qualify for the eliminator as well. So get those lineups done this week in the 4-in-1 league, and those are your leaders thus far. I'm participating in the league. A lot of you guys will see me in there. I'm not going to participate as far as any money goes. I'm just going to participate in the total points league. I'm not going to take up any spots in any of the eliminator or the tournament formats. But right now I'm sitting in 42nd right now. We've got over 100, I think we might have 128 teams right now. So good luck to everyone in that long way to go. And I think a lot of you guys are going to find it easy to make lineups over the first 2 to 4 weeks. But after that, it becomes a little bit of a challenge. Remember, you can only use a player one time in one roster build all season long. So the list of players is going to thin out as the season progresses, and you have to be a little bit more strategic with selecting your players in the coming weeks. So that takes care of the 4-in-1 tournament. My buddy Mike Bainbridge is hard at work. He's not joining me for this show. He's rocking all the DFS content. We released the Friday main slate content today. The projections posted earlier as well. A lot of you questions coming in. We are going to update some of the projections as we get news in. We usually don't update the projections as much so on Saturday morning. That's where you really got to be tuned into the Discord, tuned into the Twitter feed, with us relaying a lot of that injury news over to you guys. And for you all over in the Discord, look, I think we're nearing 700 people in there. If you're not part of the Discord family right now, you're really missing out on an entirely different resource that the CFF site's ever provided for college fantasy football. We've got team pages, injury news. It is basically the biggest hub of a biggest community of college fantasy football people in one spot. And I think if you're not in there, you're at a disadvantage and behind the 8 ball in your league, because it's certainly the place to be to bounce ideas, roster ideas. I can't say enough about it. You really just have to experience. So many guys, so many of you have sent emails in. Love the addition to the Discord to the site this year. And so I know Mike had it last year with his Patreon page. for you that were for you that were with the CFF site last year and didn't get to experience that. I was happy to roll that out this year. I didn't do it last year because I was a little worried about the season and getting too much going, whether or not we'd have a season with all the COVID stuff going on. But we are full throttle this year, and we've got more resources than we ever have for you guys. And Mike is rocking that DFS content. He's still got 2 more slates to produce for you. He's got the Saturday main slate and Saturday night slate that he's going to get rocking and rolling with, that we'll have up on the site soon. So, man, we're back to normal as much as possible. So I think that takes care of a lot of the house cleaning. And so really what I thought about doing, guys, and I may get back to do this, is I may do a post-week wrap-up show. I know I do my week notes and observations, weekly notes and observations. I'd like to do a show, just a reactionary show, because I feel like so much of my passion, my feelings comes out right after you watch the games. And I really think it would be a different feel of a show. But you know what? I said, this is what I'll do. I'll do one show this week. We'll do week 1, week 2. We'll roll it up into one, and whatever comes out, comes out. So I may reference some of last week's games. I'm going to go ahead and talk about this week's matchups, and I may reference the games last week and some of the performance, because, you know, we're getting into now where the first couple of weeks are really big for waiver wire. You know, you didn't have a good draft. You don't worry about it. A lot of leagues are won on the waiver wire, right? And so you've got to be there to really, scoop up the guys off the waiver wire. You've got to be really tuned into the box scores. You've got to be tuned into the matchups. Watch as much as you can over the first 2 weeks. The first ones, those nuggets, those waiver wire gems, as I like to call them, they're really abundant over the first 2 or 3 weeks. And the greatest thing about college fantasy football versus the NFL is that, your season doesn't make a break with a draft, right? And so you can have a bad draft and hit the waiver wire and be success and win the waiver wire and win your league. So it's a long season, long way to go for all of you season-long leagues, dynasty leagues, and even you guys playing DFS. Hopefully you find this show very interesting. And look, share your takes in the comment section if you want, but we're going to go ahead and get into this week's matchups. I mean, we've got Kansas, we've got Coastal Carolina. That's a 6:30 start on Friday. And remember, Coastal Carolina went into Kansas last year, and that's where we really learned who Coastal Carolina was. We knew that Kansas was a bad team. We thought they were just really bad. Turned out, we found 2 things out. We confirmed last year that Kansas was bad, and we also found out that Coastal Carolina was pretty good. Usual suspects there at Coastal Carolina. Still trying to figure out the running back rotation there, right? I mean, you've got Jones, you've got White. Is it going to be of a committee? Is it going to be someone they're going to lean on like they did with CJ Marable? Still a little bit to be played out there on the Coastal Carolina side. Kansas still looking to establish an identity under Lance Leopold. Started Jason Bean last week at quarterback. We'll see if that continues. North Carolina A&T playing at Duke, and damn, what a week 1 that Monteo Durant had last week. Mike and I did a show on him in the offseason about whether or not Duke would have a 1,000-yard back, because they have a history of not producing or not feeding their number 1 ball carrier a lot under Cutcliffe. But it looks like Durant so far after 1 game might be on a pace for 200 plus carries. And if so, he will be a lock for 1,000 yards. Utah State playing North Dakota. I think the story there for me is, it looks like, in my opinion, I think Logan Bonner's probably going to get the start at quarterback. I would think he would be the guy there. Devin Tompkins confirmed as the wide receiver 1, as we predicted there. Utah playing at Boise State, and boy, more people were burned last year. Last week, a lot of you all were burned last week by George Halani and his, absence. After the kickoff got delayed for 2 hours, we learned that Halani was going to be out. Now, here's one advantage, right? The advantage to having Halani this week is that Boise State plays on a Friday night. So instead of playing late Saturday night and taking a chance and risking starting Halani and getting a 0, you have a chance to really lock in. And this is where the Discord comes in too, right? We really have a chance as a community to lock into that Boise matchup, see if we get any news coming in. And I'm hopeful that if Helene is going to play this week, we get that news ahead of time. And I would think that if he's going to be healthy, he's going to get a pretty decent dose. And considering they have a matchup against UTEP, this might be the week where we actually get George Helene in the lineup. Illinois playing at Virginia, nothing really big to touch on there, except I think we could see a big dose of love in the backfield for Illinois. Obviously, Virginia is going to be a ton of Brennan Armstrong. I have to tell you, I was really shocked last week. Not a lot of target, not a lot of usage for Jelani Woods, who I had as one of the top tight ends. The talk in the preseason camp was how he was their best playmaker leading into the season. And the guy finished with one catch last week, really laid an egg. And so really burned me. Missed that one in the projections. And so went a relatively conservative this week with Jelani Woods at tight end. Kent State playing at Virginia, playing VMI. I think you're going to get, I think we've got Crum up there. I've got Crum as one of the top quarterbacks this week. This offense should get back on track. Dustin Crum, one of the top quarterbacks. It'll be interesting to see if Jayshon Polk plays and how the distribution of passes goes in that Kent State offense this week. Western Kentucky playing at Army, and this is going to be a real interesting matchup. I know a lot of you Bailey Zappi owners out there were ecstatic last week after that performance he had. But remember, keep this in mind. I did mention this in the preseason. You've got Army that's playing Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky is off next week, and then they have matchups back-to-back against Indiana and Michigan State. So you Bailey Zappi owners have a backup plan at least. If you play in a 2-quarterback league, hopefully you have a solid quarterback too, because it could be rough sledding for the Hilltoppers over the next month. But you get through September, and the rest of the year, you're going to be golden. So for you Zappi owners, it's all about surviving the next 4 weeks, and then you should be good. Kennesaw State playing at Georgia Tech. Obviously, it looks like I don't know if we're going to see Jeff Sims. I don't think they'll need Jeff Sims in this matchup. I have Jameer Woods ranked high this week. Normally not super high on players when they have really weak matchups, but this is a get-right game for Georgia Tech, and I think they lean on their best playmaker, which is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. Norfolk State playing at Wake Forest. I look for a bounce-back week for Ja'Cory Roberson. I don't see him having I could see him, I don't think he'll go 2 weeks without producing a big game for you, so I like him here. Tulsa playing at Oklahoma State. Look, let's talk about this. Oklahoma State outside receivers have thrived as long as Gundy has been there. Right now, it looks like that's Tay Martin, right? Brennan Presley was our #1 ranked receiver at Oklahoma State going into the season, and I'm not ready to budge on that. But if I had to take my bet, I'd prefer Tay Martin in the outside receiver, given the success of that position over Gundy. Although I think it's going to be close, and I think both guys are going to be incredibly valuable this year. I think what we're looking for most this week for you Spencer Sanders owners is whether or not he suits up and plays this week. Youngstown State playing at Michigan State. And wow, Kenneth Walker III last week just ran all over Northwestern, something I wasn't expecting. We talked about this in the preseason, how bad that Michigan State run offense was a year ago. Night and day compared to the opener, and I do expect to have see Kenneth Walker go over the 100-yard mark in back-to-back weeks. Miami of Ohio playing at Minnesota. 2 notes here that I thought was one thing I think is interesting in regards to Miami of Ohio. No Jalen Beston, no Tyree Shelton yet in week 1. Wondering if they're just slow coming back from their injuries of last year. And then we also have to, with Minnesota, obviously the big news with Mohamed Ibrahim going down, reports saying that it was an Achilles. It certainly didn't look good, but he's lost for the year. And so we would have to assume that a lot of you fantasy owners have scooped up Trey Potts. I have an opinion on this, relatively conservative this week on the ranking of Potts, just because we know that he is not as proven as Ibrahim, and I don't know if he's going to get that heavy of a load right out of the gate, but it's definitely a good matchup, for PJ Fleck and the coaching staff to certainly test Potts and see if he can get his carry count up there to the 15 to 20 mark and see how he holds up in this matchup. Northwestern State playing home at Indiana State. Get right game for Northwestern. Let's see if Evan Hull can produce here in this matchup. Oregon going into Ohio State. This will be a tough matchup for the Bucks. Anthony Brown trying to lead the Ducks into Ohio State. The Buckeyes may be without Stroud at quarterback this week. Whispers that maybe he may not be ready for this matchup, that maybe he's a little banged up. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Mayan Williams, obviously, with a big run early last week. Obviously Trayvon Henderson, that train has left the station, and now his hype is picking up steam after that 70-yard touchdown catch. We're going to see if the Ducks can play with the Buckeyes. I think Oregon needs to keep it close. We'll see if Anthony Brown can get them there. If not, I wonder whether or not Anthony Brown would be his job would be in jeopardy at some point over the next few weeks, because I think at that particular point, maybe Oregon would have to make a change at quarterback to say, hey, listen, we didn't, have this quarterback. We didn't have Thompson starting when we played Ohio State, and the pollsters look at him differently in the long run. But let's see if the Ducks can play with the Buckeyes. Should be a good one. Let's see how that plays out. Minnesota gave Ohio State all they could handle for the good part of 3 quarters last week. So Pitt playing at Tennessee. Let's be honest here. Joe Milton didn't look great leading that Josh Heupel offense, and I do think that Tennessee's offense is going to take I think they're going to be inconsistent this year, and I think that that's just something that we have to live with this year. So a lot of you guys that invested in the Tennessee offense, I think you're going to have some ups and downs. Obviously, Tank Bigsby with a big start for Auburn last week. They host Alabama State. I don't expect to see him in the game long. Hopefully, he gives you a big one early, maybe a couple of scores, gets out of there. South Carolina playing at East Carolina. Will Kevin Harris return this week? And that will obviously, impact a little bit of Zaquandre White, who ran for 128 yards last week in the season opener. Morgan State playing at Tulane. Pretty impressive start by Tulane last week, and Michael Pratt leading that offense, a guy that I liked. He was one of my sleepers going into the year. I like the way that Tulane looked on offense. They should have an easy time this week against Morgan State. Definitely all of you Pratt owners, get him in. I know there was some news of him being a little banged up, but it looks like he's going to play this week. Florida playing at South Florida. Obviously, a lot of you guys probably couldn't wait till I got to this one, because I'm heavily invested in Emory Jones this year. And I am, and I still feel fine with Emory Jones. The one thing that's really interesting is that a lot of the shares I have in Emory Jones are in all they're in all best ball leagues. And I think in all but one league, I've handcuffed him with Anthony Richardson. So I'm sitting pretty. I've got both Florida quarterbacks. The only way really that I get screwed is if they just split snaps the whole year. I don't really see that happening. This could be a get right game for Emory Jones. Richardson didn't exactly throw the ball well last week when he played, but he looked like a monster when he ran it. Right. And so I think Emory Jones he's going to stay the quarterback right now until he's not the quarterback. And so we'll see how that unfolds. But I feel good about Emory Jones. And like I said, I'm in best ball formats. And if not, I've got Anthony Richardson. So I'm still feeling good about my Florida quarterbacks that I have in my best ball leagues this year. Wyoming playing at Northern Illinois. And obviously Northern Illinois with an upset at Georgia Tech in the first week. Harrison Whaley running for 144 yards. So that was good news if you have Harrison Whaley heading into MAC play. Rutgers playing Syracuse. The big news there for me, Tommy DeVito still at quarterback. I think you're going to see him stick for a little while. But this could be a game that Syracuse struggles. I do feel that at some point in the next few weeks, we're going to see Garrett Schrader in there at quarterback and get a start for Syracuse. Virginia Tech did a great job holding North Carolina's offense last week. They host Middle Tennessee this week. Ohio plays Duquesne. Duquesne was destroyed by TCU last week. That should be good news for you owners of the Monterey Tuggle going into this matchup. Toledo playing at Notre Dame. Some of you guys coming in saying Notre Dame's defense wasn't in the rankings this week. They're sort of a fringe play this week. And the reason being, there's just so many FBS, FCS matchups that there's a lot of good defenses that you can stream this week going into week 2. Obviously, Jack Cohn, big week last week. And going into this week, Michael Mayer, our number 1 tight end on the board going into week 2, being the highly targeted as he was in that opening matchup at Florida State. Lou Nichols got off to a great start for Central Michigan. They play Robert Morris this week. I think one thing to keep an eye on as well is in the backfield, we talk about the value of a running back 2 at Central Michigan. Marion Lukes, 5 carries, 44 yards. Darius Bracey, only 2 carries, 14 yards. So you might want to look there if you're in deep leagues at that running back 2 spot at Central Michigan. Purdue going on the road playing at Connecticut. This should be a great matchup for Plummer. Should be a great matchup for David Bell and even Xander Horvath at running back, and even the Purdue defense. Texas A&M going on the road to play Colorado. I really like Isaiah Spiller in this matchup. I know there were some emails about David Ashane, the running back, the backup running back behind Isaiah Spiller. Devin Ashane had 2 rushing touchdowns. Remember, he got one of those late in the contest last week. Spiller was already out of the game. I do think Spiller has a big week this week. And, a lot of questions about whether or not Jared Broussard was going to get a heavy workload this year. Talk about getting him some rotation and getting other people involved in some snaps this year. They fed him early last week. He finished with 15 carries, 94 yards and a touchdown in the opener. I think he's going to get a heavy workload again this year, and that's the way it seems after the first week. In regards to Buffalo at Nebraska, Nebraska really fed the graduate transfer wide receiver Samari Toure last week. I believe he was over 100 yards in the first half. And so he'll probably, in my guess, be featured again in this matchup. And I really like him this week. Ball State going to Penn State. I think this could be a matchup Ball State struggles a little bit. Maybe Penn State takes them lightly and Ball State surprises and scores. After that tough matchup Penn State had against Wisconsin last week at Wisconsin, came out with a win. The one observation I had in that matchup is that I really like the fantasy potential of Noah Cain and Jahan Dotson, the wide receiver for Penn State. Obviously, he's a top 5 receiver for me this week. I really like the way that they're going to feature him in the pass game, and I think he's going to have a huge year this year. Temple playing on the road at Akron. Dewan Mathis, is he going to play? Is he not? I know a lot of you guys probably drafted him, and he's banged up. I think he's questionable to play this week. Really doubting Temple's offense moving forward. And if you don't have Dewan Mathis available for you this week against Akron, there's not going to be too many better matchups on the schedule this week. He might be a player you're looking to kind of move off of early. We'll see how that plays out. UAB, Dwayne McBride, look, last week was not a good week for him. A couple of fumbles, and all of a sudden, you're wondering whether or not he's going to hold on to that starting job or maybe lose it to Jermaine Brown. The one thing that I could say with a lot of certainty is that we're probably not going to get much clarity on that this week. UAB travels to Georgia. I'm not expecting much from the Blazers offense. Cal playing at TCU. I know a lot of you guys out there that were fans of Quentin Johnston, probably looking for a big week for him this week. I still, going into the season, I'm still not a huge fan of that TCU offense. I don't know if it's going to be much improved from last year. I'll say a little bit improved. And I don't know, aside from Max Duggan after the first week, if I would want another player right now. So we'll see how that works out. And we'll see how the carries get distributed this week with Zach Evans, that running back for TCU. Remember, he was a guy that I thought at the beginning of the year that would be a 700 to 800 rusher or a 12 to 1300 yard rusher. It was going to depend on how they were going to feed him. And after the first week, I know they played Duquesne. a little bit of a mixed bag. So right now it's a little bit of a hold on your TCU players. This week should give us a lot of clarity on how that offense is going to work, or how it's going to look, or how they may project moving forward. Murray State playing at Cincinnati. Hopefully you guys get a lot early out of Desmond Ridder and Jerome Ford. I don't expect to see them in the game for much longer than 3 quarters there. Navy, still a lot of uncertainty going on at quarterback. That's the big question for the midshipmen. Can they find a quarterback to get themselves right? And I think Air Force probably rolls in that matchup. Boston College playing at UMass. Great matchup for the Boston College defense. Phil Jerkovic at quarterback. I expect to see him sling the ball around the park. He should have a big game, one of the top quarterbacks we have on the list this week. Georgia Southern playing at Florida Atlantic. Georgia Southern started Amari Jones at quarterback last week. He was the transfer running back that came over from Tulane, but I didn't get a chance to watch many bits of this game. I just saw some highlights, but by all accounts, it seems like there's a lot of support for Cam Ranson to take over the offense. So we'll see how that plays out over this week, and then moving forward when Justin Tomlin is supposed to return from his suspension. He's out. I believe he's academically ineligible right now. Alabama, Mercer. The question is how long are we going to see the starters play? Will Bryce Young get his production in before he has to leave the game? Iowa at Iowa State. Remember, Iowa State started with a dud last year. They lost their opener to Louisiana Lafayette. Iowa State struggled once again out of the gate this week. We'll see how that matchup with Iowa unfolds. The Hawkeyes looked impressive last week. In-state rivalry. This may actually be the toughest game on the schedule on paper for Breece Hall. And, that's going to really be the question. Will we see Breece Hall be held under 100 yards in back-to-back games? That's a good question. This game is a home game for Iowa. And, if I have projected Breece Hall projected at right under 100 yards, but I wouldn't doubt that Breece Hall goes over 100 yards in this game. And the one thing, if he doesn't, I like his chances to get over 100 total yards, and know that if the Cyclones find the offense, there's a good chance that Breece Hall is going to find the end zone. So I'm not looking to bench Breece Hall, but some of you guys that are playing in shallow leagues that have really deep benches, I can see where you would consider benching Hall if you feel like you have a really, really good matchup with your running backs that are sitting there on your bench. Clemson, a get-right game with South Carolina State. We're still waiting to see what's going to go on with that Clemson backfield. For me, that's the big question now. They don't play Georgia. Let's see how they divvy out the carries this week. Or is it going to be more of a committee approach and try to get DJU, the quarterback, get him on the right page? He struggled last week against Georgia. Obviously, his pick six decided the contest, and so we'll see how that shakes out. For me, the nice surprise was Joseph Nagata, who, throughout most of the camp, we were getting reports that he was a little banged up, whether or not he was going to play. It looks like EJ Williams will come back this week, but it was nice to see Nagata have a good week. It looks like he'll be a fantasy factor into this year. West Virginia hosting CW Post. We've got Letty Brown as #1 running back posted up there on the website. Whether or not he finishes in that spot remains to be seen. I don't after what FIU did to CW Post last week, you have to think that West Virginia is going to have the scoreboard in their favor by halftime this week. But the reason why Letty Brown is up there so high on the list, even though they have such weak competition, he may not play more than 2.5 quarters, maybe even 3 at most, is that most of the offense is built around Letty Brown. So I can see him getting his early touches, getting a couple of early touchdowns, and then leaving the game, hopefully, with close to 100 yards and 2 scores. And I think from a security standpoint, he's a pretty safe bet to at least find the end zone one time this weekend. Western Michigan should get right after a matchup against Michigan last week. That's good news for Caleb Ellaby, running back Ladarius Jefferson. I think you get those guys. You get them in your lineups. Jalen Hall as well. UTSA with an impressive road win against Illinois last week. That's a good sign. I think Frank Harris is a good matchup for him. I think he's a little bit of an under the radar play this week. running backs, Sincere McCormick and Zachary Franklin at wide receiver. Charlotte with a nice win against Duke last week. Let's see if they could follow it up. A little bit of a committee approach in the backfield for Charlotte, but let's see if they could put together two solid performances. Chris Reynolds, remember, a quarterback that was banged up last week. In 19 of 30, 324 yards, 3 TDs. Dubose, Tucker both went over 100 yards in the opener. Let's see how that Charlotte passing game looks in week 2 and see if they're going to be a viable, consistent option for us moving forward. Houston playing at Rice. Rice gave Arkansas all they could handle for just about 3.5 quarters last week. Clayton Tune. There's just some things that haven't changed. And I think Clayton Tune, the one thing that we looked for going into the year was he going to be able to clean up the mess? Was he going to be able to stop putting the ball in the hands or finding the hands of the defenders? And I believe he threw 3 interceptions. I'm going to check that real quick. He threw 4 interceptions in the opener last week against Texas Tech. Not a good sign for you Clayton Tune owners right now after week 1. One of my personal favorites, Marshall. I know they ran a bunch of touchdowns last week, but I did mention in the preseason that I thought that they would open up the offense this year. And I think that's what they did in the opener. Grant Wells, 333 yards passing. He did not throw a touchdown. The Thundering Herd punched in 6 on the ground, led by Rasheen Ali, who scored 4. Sheldon Evans punched in a couple of himself, but it was nice to see Talik Keaton, Corey Gamage, both of those guys go over 90 yards. And I really like that Marshall offense moving forward. One of my sleepers going into this year. Central Florida was able to turn things around against Boise State in that opener. And you really have to like Isaiah Bowser moving forward. I think I was a little low on Jalen Robinson because of Gus Malzahn coming in, but I really liked what I saw. I think you should feel good about him and Dylan Gabriel moving forward. Those were the 2 questions that I had, was the passing game of UCF with Gus Malzahn coming in, but after the opener against Boise State. Now, look, they were playing from behind for a good bit of the game, but I did like what I saw out of the Knights, and I do think that those picks are going to be fine this year. Appalachian State going on the road, playing at Miami. I think this could be a matchup where Appalachian State struggles a little bit. I think if there's an encouraging sign for the Mountaineers, it was that Chase Bryce played solidly in his first start after being an absolute turnover machine at Duke last year. So it was nice to see him come in, have a good opener for Appalachian State. And I think for Miami, I think the one thing that I got out of the matchup against Alabama was with the confidence and the comfort at which De'Ara King played. Sure, Alabama was able to overmatch the Hurricanes, but I think if you have De'Ara King, the one concern I had was how was he going to be coming back from injury, and I think he's going to be okay for you moving forward. Kansas State hosted Southern Illinois. Certainly a good start if you have Deuce Vaughn. I think he'll have another big week this week against Southern Illinois, and he was a player I was low on going into the season. Let's see how he goes as the season progresses, but he may be able to pick up. He's picked up where he left off, and he may be able to continue that. Maybe, perhaps. I was a little low on him going into the season. Let's see how they use him this week. Oklahoma hosting Western Carolina. The Sooners got more than they could handle from Tulane, particularly late there in that contest. For me, the one thing that I'm looking at with Oklahoma is I really watch Spencer. Well, first of all, let's talk about Eric Gray. Eric Gray's a hold right now. I do think you do. I think you will have some concerns if you're an owner there. That matchup was about as good as you could possibly get, even though they were playing by about 3 scores ahead for the good part of about quarter and a half, 2 quarters. I didn't like what I saw out of Eric Gray. We'll see. I think he's a hold for another week. Let's see what happens this week against Western Carolina. But for me, I'm looking at Spencer Rattler, and I'm looking at a guy that he's projected to go early in drafts NFL this year. I just don't see I just don't see it in him. I'm not a big fan of Spencer Rattler. I love the way he throws the ball. I mean, man, he can just fling it and it goes, but I just don't like the decision-making process. I don't like the way he reads a defense. He throws too many questionable balls, in my opinion. I think had 2 interceptions last week, possibly could have thrown 2 more. I just haven't seen any maturity in the way that he goes through his progressions and makes decisions throwing the football. And that was a player I thought would have a jump in fantasy production this year. After 1 week, I'm doubting that. We'll see how that plays out. I'm not sure a matchup against Western Carolina is going to give me the answers that I'm looking for out of Spencer Rattler. Eastern Michigan, let's see what's going on with Preston Hutchinson. I know he took a hit to the head last week, came out of the game, went back in. Ben Bryant, the transfer from Cincinnati, came in. Let's see how this unfolds against Wisconsin. For me, it's got to be Ches Mulisi at running back 1 until it's not Ches Mulisi. So over 100 yards in the opener for Wisconsin. I would imagine he's going to really nail down that running back 1 spot, at least for a couple of weeks, as long as he doesn't turn the ball over. He got a great matchup against Eastern Michigan. I think you'll see him solidify himself in that running back 1 role this week. And I'll be honest with you, that was one that I whiffed on. I was a fan of Jalen Berger all throughout camp. He couldn't seem to stay healthy, didn't even get a carry, I believe, last week. Milisi's come in, made an impact. He's performed well in that opener against a tough defense in Penn State. And like I said, I just think he solidifies himself as that running back 1 going into the season. Memphis playing at Arkansas State. It looks like Grant Gunnell is going to be out for a little while. I think the one encouraging thing for Memphis is really Brandon Thomas solidifying himself in that running back 1 role for Memphis. If you guys were able to pick him up on the waiver wire, you have to really feel good. And my boy Lane Hatcher doing it, right? I mean, they started James Blackman. It's like they don't want to like Lane Hatcher, but the guy keeps showing them that he's their quarterback. Came in, threw three or 4 touchdown passes. He threw 4 touchdowns, 12 of 12, 4 touchdown passes. And I think 3 of them went to Corey Rucker, who finished with 138 yards. So there you go. Lane Hatcher coming in and saying, you guys, keep doing this to me every year. I'm going to keep showing you the good. So good for Lane Hatcher, good for you guys that drafted him, and good for you guys that drafted Corey Rucker, because it seems like they have a connection going. And if you have Corey Rucker, you want to see Lane Hatcher in there. Louisiana Tech, I look with Louisiana Tech, Austin Kendall, impressive numbers against Mississippi State on the road. That's really encouraging. I think you have to feel good about him moving forward, leading that Louisiana Tech offense and giving you some fantasy production this year. Louisiana Lafayette, Chris Smith should get right here. I think for me, the biggest question with Louisiana Lafayette is who's going to nail down that running back 2 role? Is it going to be Imani Bailey, or is it going to be the true freshman Montrell Johnson? For me, that's really where it comes into play. And, Montrell Johnson is the bigger back, where Bailey's a little bit of a lighter back. And I could see this playing out where 3 guys get carries. Maybe they use Johnson a little bit more around the goal line. I don't know. We're going to find out. But much like Central Michigan, where I said keep an eye on that running back 2 spot, I think we have to keep an eye on the running back 2 spot here at Louisiana Lafayette. Bijan Robinson with a strong start to the season. They play at Arkansas. And, KJ Jefferson, how did he look last week? I didn't think he looked too good. That was one of the games I was trying to watch as many games as I could at different time spots last week. And, I'm sitting there next to my dad, and, he's got money on Arkansas, and he's minus the points. And, my dad's 67 years old, 68, and he's sitting next to me, and he's looking at this Arkansas game, and all he's telling me is, "Oh, this kid's terrible. This kid's terrible." And of course, he was referencing KJ Jefferson. And so my dad was basically calling his shots, calling as he saw it. And so, KJ Jefferson reminded me a little bit of Adrian Martinez in the fact that he didn't look good. He may not be the best when it comes to throwing the ball, but he found a way to produce for his fantasy owners. And so I don't know how Jefferson's going to do long-term leading this offense, particularly as a passer. Leading this offense, much like Adrian Martinez doesn't look great leading Nebraska, but he finds a way with his legs to make himself fantasy relevant. And as a fantasy owner, that's all you're really looking for right now. So it doesn't matter how ugly KJ Jefferson looks. What matters is all you care about is the fantasy points, unless you're a fan of the Razorbacks. But many of us just have fantasy stock in KJ Jefferson, and that's all that matters. NC State playing at Mississippi State. That Ricky Person, Zonovan Knight 1-2 punch is going to be pretty deadly all season long. Another two-back system that is going to produce. And then Mississippi State, it was nice to see Will Rogers finally get back on track, let a comeback win over Louisiana Tech. So the Bulldogs on the second straight year, even though they've struggled under Leach last year, opening up with a win for consecutive years. Baylor hosting Texas Southern should be an easy matchup there. North Texas playing at SMU. Jace Ruder wasn't incredibly impressive in the opener last week. They really rode DeAndre Torrey. I think the offense will ride DeAndre Torrey, but I think we're going to see the North Texas pass game open up this week, because they're going to have to put up points and keep up with SMU and Tana Mordecai, who looked great through 7 TD passes in his first game in a Mustangs uniform. The biggest note for me is I received a couple of emails, season things on Discord about people that want to jump ship on Reggie Roberson after 1 week. Look, there were like 5 different guys that caught a touchdown pass last week. 1, 2, 3, 4. He was amongst the top 5 receivers, the only guy amongst the top 5 receivers to not have a touchdown pass. Do not jump ship on Reggie Roberson this early, guys. Come on, it's only 1 week. There's always a week 1 overreaction to the guys that do very good, and there's always a week 1 overreaction to the guys that don't have a good week. Sometimes you have to stick, sometimes you have to hold, sometimes you have to move off quick. Reggie Roberson is not one of those guys where I'm looking to move off quick. Texas Tech hosting SF Austin this week. And I think for me, as long as SaRodorick Thompson is out right now, Taj Brooks looks like a great play at the running back spot this week. And Eric Ezekama should be a must start. He's a top 10 receiver in my book this week going into the matchup. New Mexico State, New Mexico, skip over that. Louisville hosting Eastern Kentucky. Let's see if Louisville can get things going against Eastern Kentucky. They did not get much going early on in that Labor Day matchup against Ole Miss. Remember, Ole Miss's defense was terrible last year. Louisville's either Ole Miss improved defensively or Louisville's offense made them look really good. I think it's a combination of both. A lot of turnover, a lot of attrition at Louisville over the past year, and I think it's going to take a couple of games for them to come together. But stick on stick at running back for Louisville right now, and stick with Cunningham at quarterback. And what's interesting at running back, when you look at Louisville, Hassan Hall had 6 carries last week. It felt like at times he was getting as many touches as Jalen Mitchell, but it's not quite. Mitchell had twice as many carries, and I think you're going to see Mitchell get a lot more carries in future matchups as Louisville is able to play from ahead, and that's really the key to that Louisville offense. Southern Miss hosted Grambling State. No Jason Brownlee last week. That was a surprise, but I did see where he suffered a foot injury during camp. I'm wondering if that injury has him slow to return, and I think that's why he's missing there. And I like Frank Gore in this matchup. Liberty hosting Troy should be a good matchup. Malik Willis, Taylor Powell looked good in his first start, to start the opener for Troy. That should be a good game for Malik Willis, as they're going to probably have to score some points this week. Texas State playing FIU. Great start for Devontae Price there at running back. Let's go to Howard at Maryland. Both receivers, I mentioned at the beginning of the year that I think Dante Demas, in my opinion, was going to finish as the better fantasy receiver than the highly recruited Rakeem Jarrett after 1 week. Both guys over 100 yards both guys over 120 yards, and both guys with a touchdown. North Carolina hosted Georgia State. Both teams coming off of very unimpressive week ones, but I know a lot of you guys out there really interested to see what's going on with that North Carolina offense. Josh Downs had his number last week. Will we see anything from Ty Chandler this week? Will we see any improvements from Sam Howell? It was just quite shocking what they were not able to do last week. North Carolina really has to get things figured out and get things figured out quickly for you fantasy owners. Idaho playing at Indiana. Michael Penix needs to get right in this matchup right here. Maybe a big game for Ty Freifogel at receiver. Indiana shouldn't have any problems in this matchup. Missouri playing at Kentucky, a big matchup in the SEC East. And for me, this is just going to be the battle of the running backs. Tyler Beatty versus Chris Rodriguez. Those are the two top fantasy assets in this matchup. Let's see if either of those guys or both can get over the 100-yard mark. Ole Miss playing Austin Peay. Expect to see Matt Corral get his numbers early. For me, I think the one thing that I learned in that matchup in the opener, if things stay consistent for the Ole Miss offense, Dontario Drummond seems like he's wide receiver one in that offense. Now, Braylon Sanders, a lot of questions coming in. Should we get rid of Braylon Sanders? I'm not ready to dump on Braylon Sanders right now. Braylon Sanders was overthrown in the end zone one time. He's going to be a little bit more of the vertical threat. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see Drummond's receptions. Maybe he's going to finish with more receptions than Braylon Sanders, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Braylon Sanders finish with 4 or 5 catches and easily over 100 yards. I think he's going to be a little bit more of a vertical target for Matt Corral. And so I do think the big days, big games for Braylon Sanders are certainly coming. And this could be a case where maybe we're going to see alternating games here. But I do like Drummond and I do like Sanders as being the top 2 targets there. I know when we were kind of going into the season, there was a lot of talk, a lot of whispers about John Rice Plumlee. He was in there in 4 receiver sets. I only saw him targeted 3 times. It looks like for sure it's definitely Drummond, Sanders, and Mingo 1, 2, 3 at receiver there. Florida State, will we see Mackenzie Milton there starting this week, who came in and led a comeback against Notre Dame late when Jordan Travis left the game? I think for me, the one thing that I really like is I like the way that they're using Keyshawn Helton there at receiver. I thought Andrew Parchment would be the top receiver for the Seminoles, but I think it's actually going to be Helton. Washington playing at Michigan. That Washington offense, incredibly vanilla. Michigan loses Ronnie Bell. I'm curious to see this might be just a boring matchup to watch, but I think it's going to be an interesting one. That Washington offense, in my opinion, needs some help. Other than K-Dot, and I don't know if I want a piece of any of that offense right now. It'll be interesting to see what Michigan does or who replaces Ronnie Bell at receiver. LSU hosting McNeese State. Big week, Kayshon Boutte last week. Max Johnson, I felt, had a big week, could have even played better. Let's see if he improves in week 2. McNeese isn't the worst FCS opponent that LSU could play, so I do expect to see those starters in the game for at least 2, maybe even 2.5 quarters, if not 3, if McNeese State can put up some points on LSU's defense, which didn't look great last week against UCLA. So we're going to find out, is it an LSU problem, or is UCLA really legit after making Hawaii look like basically a high school defense in that week 0 matchup? San Diego State playing at Arizona. I think the surprise for me last week was New Mexico State actually scoring a bunch of points or actually putting up some yards against San Diego State. I think they took a 10-0 lead after New Mexico State basically looked like they couldn't do anything against UTEP the week before. And then Stanley Berryhill getting 13 targets, catching 12 passes last week for Arizona. Gunnar Cruz looks like he's going to be the quarterback 1 there for the Wildcats. Let's see if that connection continues going into week 2 against San Diego State. Colorado State looks like tight end Trey McBride picking up where he left off. Vanderbilt struggled last week, lost to an FCS opponent. Actually, Colorado State lost as well. So both of these coming off of losses to FCS opponents, but Make no mistake about it, the Colorado State loss was to the FCS runner-up, San Diego State Jackrabbits. So that wasn't a terrible loss, but Vandy loss was just terrible. I believe it was to Eastern Illinois. Let me check. East Tennessee State. Bad loss by the Commodores right now. And if you have any part of Ramon Davis, that's what you want to watch this matchup this week to see if you're going to be cutting bait or if you're going to be sticking with him. Cal Poly playing at Fresno State should be a big week for the Bulldogs offense. Utah playing at BYU after the first week. It looks like it's Tavion Thomas, Michael Bernard as the top two backs for Utah. I just don't know if we're going to get one back that takes on a heavy workload right now. If we're going to see that, we're going to have to see it soon, or it could be a committee approach there. Idaho State hosting Nevada should be fireworks for the Nevada offense this week. UNLV playing at Arizona State. I don't expect to see much from, or expect to get much from Charles Williams and that UNLV offense. But I've said this a number of times, and I'll say it again. I'm heavy on the Arizona State run offense. I love Jaden Daniels as a quarterback. I think his decision-making, whether it's through RPO, whether it's passing, he knows how to read a defense. I really like him translating into the next level. I just don't think he's a great college fantasy football quarterback. I want all the Rachaad White and all the Chip Trayanum as I could have in this offense. I don't really want a part of any of the Arizona State passing game, but give me those two guys in the run game all day, every day. And another two-back system that I think is going to produce for fantasy owners all year. Stanford playing at USC. Stanford needs to get things on track. Austin Jones, very subpar week. Let's see if he can get back on track this week. And then Gary Bryant returning for USC offense this week. Let's see how that affects maybe the distribution of targets for Drake London and Taj Washington. Will it affect it? I don't think it will affect much. Remember, USC's offense under Graham Harrell over the last couple of years, I think the top three receivers have averaged over 5.5 to 6 catches. They've had 3 receivers every year average over 5.5 catches per game in that offense. So I don't think London and Washington suffer much by the return of Gary Bryant. And then the late matchup to close out the slate, Hawaii at Oregon State. Let's see what Calvin Turner does for his fantasy owners this week. See if Chevin Cordero can make any improvements here against the Oregon State Beavers on the road. That's a 10 o'clock matchup here at my time, 11 o'clock on the East Coast. So that'll be the fantasy matchup that will keep owners up to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And that covers the whole slate, guys. I didn't think I was going to do every game, but we did. We went on quite a bit. I was itching to do a show. I'm back home, back in the office now. I'm going to try to get this uploaded into a video, into a podcast, and get this up for you guys to give you some other content to kind of listen to, get you in the mood for the weekend, get things going. We don't have a Thursday night matchup this week. We've got some Friday night. Mike's already written up his Friday night DFS content. It's up there on the website. We've got the projections on the website. We've got Mike's DFS content coming for Saturday main slate, Saturday late as well. So you can be on the lookout for those two things. And then over the weekend, my notes and observations from week 2. Mike will be doing the waiver wire for you guys once again. And then we're going to fire right back up into week 3 projections and try to get those up a little bit earlier this week now that things are a little bit more normal over here, guys. But that's going to do it for week 2. For the week 1, week /week 2 show. My name is Joe DeSalvo, the voice of the CFF site. It's glad to be back. I'll be thinking about many of you guys that live in and around the New Orleans area that had to be evacuated, that took on any damage. The community's coming back, and thanks to all of you guys that, one, have supported the CFF site over the years, continue to do so this year, and also give us a lot of feedback on the way that we can improve. And then 2, for you guys that have reached out to me individually and kind of expressed concern, interest, and given me some well wishes, knowing that we were evacuated for the hurricane, and glad to give you a thumbs up that all is well. So that's going to do it for week 2, guys. We're going to see you in week 3. Good luck this week in your leagues. Good luck this week in DFS. See you next week, guys.